And I want to share something with you guys just as they're passing that along, and then I'll explain what to do in a second. We got an email through our church email this week, and someone at the end of service for the first part of the series, they sent this in, and it was an anonymous email, so I don't know who it was, but they had written this thing, and they said, I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is a song or a poem or lyrics, but I just felt I needed to get this off my heart and share this. And so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to share with you just a little bit of what this person wrote after our services last Sunday. They wrote this. It said, don't let my own will drown the still voice that is you. When I cannot hear your whisper, teach me to wait until I do. I will listen to my calling and all the plans you have made. And when I hear you speak, I will not be afraid. Isn't that great? I love that. You should clap for that. And that should be the last time I need to give the clapping cue. We'll just understand it from here on out. And here's what I love, the one piece in there where he says, when I cannot hear, that they wrote, when I cannot hear your whisper, teach me to wait until I do. And I often hear people say the phrase, I don't know if have you ever heard someone say the phrase, I'm just waiting on God? I'm just waiting on God. And the thing that as a human being, I know my response is, yeah, give me a hug. Bro hug, I'm more comfortable, side hug, but yeah. But then this is the thing that I kind of always want to correct, that I love that's written here. It says, when I cannot hear you whisper, teach me to wait until I do. That it's not I'm just waiting. And when we talk about waiting on God, sometimes we get the sense like I'm up here and I'm waiting for God to catch up. Like, come on, kind of like parents of young kids, like when you're in a hurry and your kids can never seem to match your pace, especially when you're in a hurry and it's like, we got stuff to do. And I'm like, my legs are tired. And I'm like, come on, let's go. And I feel like sometimes we give that connotation, like I'm here and I'm just waiting on God to catch up. And no, that's not the case. We're never waiting on God. Because what has happened in the moment of waiting is transformation. What's happened in the moment of waiting is that God is teaching us something. And so when I cannot hear your voice, teach me to wait until I do, acknowledges the way in which God works in those moments in which we feel like we're paused. That the reality is this, is that you are never waiting on God, that God is waiting on you. That's a good start to today. That's a good start to today. And so I believe for some of us that today will be that day in which our holdup is no longer there. I believe for some of us that today will be the day in which the moment in which we have put pause on our life and we're stuck, we will hit the play button and we will begin to move forward. So would you turn to your neighbor, tell them today is that day. Now this is what I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna ask you that you would take that piece of paper that you receive, and if you're watching online or Facebook, find a piece of paper. These are like 3x5 pieces of paper. You can find anything around you. Find a piece of paper. And this is what I'm gonna ask you to do. Those of you who are in the first row, you may have to ask for some help from the people behind you because you need access to a pen. I'm gonna ask you to take that piece of paper and to write on it the worst thing you have ever done. Now, you may think I'm joking. I am not. I want you to write on it the worst thing you have ever done. Now, if you need to put it in code, that's fine. You can put it in code. Some of you may be nervous that the people around you can see what you're writing. I assure you, they're not looking at your paper. They're concerned that you're looking at theirs, okay? So we're all feeling the same thing in this moment, okay? But I want you to write on it the worst thing that you have ever done. No one else will see this. Fold it in half, put it in your pocket, hang on to it. Do not leave it in your pew, because I know where you sit, okay? So we just say that there. Not a priest, not doing confession here. That's not what's happening this morning. But I want you to write down on it the worst thing that you have ever done, and then fold it and hang on to it, and you will use that later in the service. And I know for some of you that'll occupy your attention for a second, but I want to go ahead and get into what we're going to talk about today. For those of you who are note takers, the title of the message today is Hide or Seek. Hide or seek. And I realized the context of that this past week. I was playing hide and seek with my children, and I thought the rules of the game were pretty clear, and so, because they're fairly evident, hide and seek. And so went to Molly, my 4-year-old. She was going to be the seeker, so she was going to count to 20, which usually takes a long time because we kind of get a cycle between 12 and 14 and kind of on an endless loop, and then sometimes she'll get out of that. And so it's just like she's going to count, so she's like sitting underneath our dining room table. Okay, I'm gonna count to 20. And so I go off and hide. And it's like 10 minutes later and I'm still hiding, which as a dad is awesome. Like I am great at games that occupy my children and require minimum effort from me. We play a game in my house that's called when Daddy gets home from work, he lays down on the floor, and all the kids jump on him and wrestle him and jump on his back, and sometimes I fall asleep. Favorite game. It's my favorite game in the whole wide world. I was like, all right, guys, here we go. Lay down, they're all over it. And so hide and seek is another one of those games. I was like, let's play hide and seek. That's called I'm gonna take a nap. Let's do it. Here we go. And so I have been hiding, and I've been there for about 10 minutes, which I wasn't upset about. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't upset about it, except the problem was that there were some football games on. And I had not hidden in a spot in which there was a television. And I realized the error of my ways, and I will never commit the same error again because I am teachable within that. But I was like, what is going on? And so I went out to see where to watch some football, and I was like, my 4-year-old Molly, like, she's not anywhere. Like, where on earth is she? And so I looked around, and she was sitting underneath the dining room table, still no longer counting. I was like, Molly, what is going on? Like, you're the seeker. And she goes, oh, I thought you guys were all looking for me too. I was like, no. It's not hiding. Like you were the seeker, we were hiding. Like you don't do both. She goes, oh, I thought it was hide and seek. Well, no, it's hide or seek because you can't do both. And that's what I want you to see this morning. You cannot hide and seek. You can hide or seek. You cannot do both. The passage that we're going to look at today is in the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 2. If you have your Bible with you, that's where we're going to be. If not, you can use the one in the row that you're in. If you don't have one, that's our gift to you, or you can follow along, as always, at bcnazarene.org/gatherings. In Exodus chapter 2, we find an incredibly interesting account of a guy by the name of Moses. Now, if you're familiar with Moses, let me give a little future story and backstory to Moses just for a second. Moses is the man who will lead his people, the Israelites, out of slavery, out of Egypt. And so what has happened is that his people, the Israelites, have been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. And through dramatic and miraculous events, he leads them out of slavery, and not himself, but eventually they are led into the promised land. But the situation, the circumstances in which Moses is positioned to do that are incredibly important. Moses is a Hebrew baby boy. At a certain point in time, we touched on this somewhat last week. Pharaoh is afraid because the Hebrews keep growing in number, and he's afraid that they're going to be able to overpower the Egyptians. And so not only does he enslave them, but years and years later, Pharaoh issues this order that every Hebrew baby boy 2 years old and under was to be killed. Every Hebrew baby boy 2 years old and under was to be killed. Moses' mom does not accept that law. And so she places her son in a basket, places that basket in the river, and through God's mighty hand, he directs that basket directly to Pharaoh's household. And so Moses, this boy who should have been killed, is raised in Pharaoh's household, raised like one of his own sons. And so we have this man, Moses, who is Hebrew, watching his people enslaved and oppressed, and yet in Pharaoh's household. And so this is one of the instances that we see that created tension in Moses' life. Exodus chapter 2, starting in verse 11, it says this. Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. The next day, when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw 2 Hebrew men fighting. "Why are you beating up your friend?" Moses said to the one who had started the fight. The man replied, "Who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" Then Moses was afraid, thinking, "Everyone knows what I did." Turn to your neighbor, tell him, everyone knows. It's not hard in this to feel Moses' fear, is it? Like, that's not difficult for us to experience. Now, while I imagine few of us have had the experience of killing someone and burying their body in the sand, while I hope few of us have had the experience of killing someone and burying their body in the sand, we can certainly relate to his emotion, can't we? Everyone knows what I did. It's terrifying. I'm more of an NBA fan than I should be, okay? Just say it like that. I love the NBA. The season starts on Tuesday. Pray for my Celtics, okay? So I'll just put that out there. All right. And so I was listening to some talking heads recently talk about the season. They were evaluating players, and they were saying, trust me, if you're not an NBA fan, this has a point, okay? Because, if I was telling this story to my wife, she'd already be done. She'd be like, I'm good. No thanks. Okay, so we're going somewhere with this. But they were talking about evaluating players, and they're saying the problem with how people usually evaluate players is they just talk about their strengths. They go, oh, he's good at that, he's good at that. But then they were saying, but every single player has positives and negatives. They have things that they bring to the team and things that they take away from the team. And so they held up this player. They go, look at Russell Westbrook. And they say, like, Russell Westbrook, he's got so much energy. Like, he's the best in the world at the fast break. He's good at offense, good at defense, but he's a cancer to the team. He's a ball hog. He never shares what's going on. And we need to be as aware of his weaknesses as we are his strengths. And they kept doing it play after player. Like, great post player, lazy. Great shooter, doesn't hustle. Great ball handler, can't shoot. And so they were saying what we need to be aware of for these players that we evaluate is oftentimes their negatives, their weaknesses outweigh their strengths, even when their strengths are good. And as we were talking through all these people and completely dismantling their lives and talent and everything else, I realized that's our fear, is maybe that's how people talk about us. Oh yeah, they're great. Like, they're nice, they're fun to hang out with, but don't go through a difficult time with them. They're great one-on-one, but they're terrible in a crowd. I'd love to be with them in this event, but not here. And it's that fear that maybe everyone is evaluating us based upon our strengths and based upon our weaknesses, based upon our positive traits and based upon our failures. And they're weighing us back and forth, deciding whether or not they want to be in a relationship with us, not just based upon what we bring to the table, but what we take from it at the same point in time. And Moses' fear comes up in this moment. Like, Moses' fear is he goes, I've got all these things. He's like position, he's got stature, he's got influence, he's got talent. But then all of a sudden in a moment they go, and we know what else you did. And he's afraid. And for most of us, the reality is this, is our greatest fear is not in something that lies in front of us, but something that sits behind us. It's not the anxiety and worry of something coming up in our future, but the pain of the guilt that lies in our past. And so Moses does what almost every single one of us do. This is what it says in verse 15 of Exodus chapter 2. It says, and sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened, and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian. He arrived in Midian, and he sat down beside a well. Moses ran, which is what we all want to do. I was reading this book recently by a guy by the name of Mike Foster, and he was telling the story of going boating when he was in college. And he was sharing, like, he's on this boat, and there's girls on the boat, and he wanted to impress all the girls on the boat, and so he was going to try to ski. And so he was ready to ski, and the boat started, and he fell, and the boat started, and he fell, and the boat started, and he fell. And he says, I was impressing no one. And I understand how that feels, because I tried to go skiing, and my wife went skiing, and she went up, and she skied all around the lake. And I got in the water like, well, if Bethany can do it, you can do it. And I wasn't going to say that, but I felt that. Like, that's what was going on. Bethany can do it. I can do it. You're exactly right. And the boat started, and I got up, and I fell. And the boat started, and I got up, and I fell. And they're like, do it again. I'm like, nope, I've had enough humiliation for today. I'm good. I'm going to go sit in the boat. So I understand what Mike is talking about when he says, like, he just couldn't, every single time he couldn't get up. And so he says his ego had taken a hit. And so as they're going along, they've got someone skiing, and the guy who was driving the boat says, Mike, would you like to drive? He's like, sure, everyone will be impressed when I can drive. If I can't ski, I'll be the best driver of the boat, and everyone will think I'm great. And he said, I'd only been driving the boat for a little bit. In the skier motion, he wanted to circle back around the lake, and so I started to turn the boat, and I didn't see the skier who was in the ground waiting for another boat to pick him up. And I hit him. And then this is how he described his emotional reaction to that event. This is what he writes. He says, and I just wanted to run as far and fast as I could from what I had done. Run from myself, run from what everyone was now thinking, run from the fact that there was no going back, no undoing this, no repairing the damage. I wanted to escape. We understand that, don't we? Like, we've all had those moments in our lives where you just go, I just need out of here. Like, that's all I need, nothing else. I just need out of this moment more than anything else. And that is where the game of hide or seek begins. Because this is what we do, is we take an event that happened, or a thought that we have, or something that we did, or something that happened to us, and we try to run from it. And we go, if I could just get ahead, if I could just like stay hidden so this doesn't find me out, I'd be good. Like, you've had those moments, whether it's something that actually happened, or it may just be like a thought in your head that you just go, man, if anyone knew what I was thinking right now, they would not like me. Is that just me? I am so grateful. Last Sunday, we had a lock-in with our junior high girls. So our junior high girls had a lock-in here. And I actually realized that we were having a lock-in with our junior high girls when I showed up at 6:30 in the morning, and I was greeted in the lobby by 3 junior high girls in their animal onesies. I was surprised to see them, and they were surprised to see me. Let's just say, hello, ladies. Have a good night? We didn't sleep at all. Good for you. And so I kept going along, and one of the small group leaders, Jen Chaltry, who helped host the lock-in, she was telling me that morning, she's going, hey, next time we do this, you're going to have to help chaperone, Kevin. You're going to be a part of chaperone. And my first thought is, that is never, ever, ever going to happen, first off. And she's like, no, you'll be fine. I was like, no, we've got church on, you had it on Saturday, we've got church on Sunday morning, I can't do that. She goes, you could still get up and preach after a lock-in. Like, you could still get up and preach on a Sunday morning after having a lock-in on Saturday. And I told her really clear, I said, I could get up and preach. But here is the problem, is a full night's rest enables me to have a filter. Now, some of you hear that and you go, really? This filter is me with 8 hours of sleep. If I don't have 8 hours of sleep, there's no filter, and I don't have a job. That's what's gonna happen. Yes, that's exactly right. Are we clapping for the illustration or the fact that I won't have a job? Because I'm feeling very self-conscious in this moment, if we can be honest about that. And so here's the thing for each of us. We have these moments in our past. We have these moments. And the thought that we have in our head is if I could just keep that aside, then I can go live my life. If I could just push that away, keep that hidden, or make sure no one finds out about it, then I can move forward. And we begin playing hide or seek. But there's two problems with that, two massive problems. The first problem is this, is that your past is a master at hide and seek. Your past is a master at hide and seek. And at some point in time, we began telling people this, and this was incorrect. We began telling people this: every lie that you tell will be found out. Everything that you've done will be found out. We begin telling people that. Now, just to be clear, I still tell my kids that. It's not true, okay? But I want my kids to think, every lie you tell, I will know. I will know everything, okay? And so I want that, but the reality is, as adults, that's not true. We can acknowledge that. Every lie you have told, other people didn't find out. Everything bad that you've done, other people didn't find out about it. They didn't. But it finds you in different ways. The lies that you tell somehow have a way of affecting your personality, of affecting your behavior. The things that you have done in secret that only you are aware of shape you, form you, erode trust in your relationships based upon your attitudes, perspectives, thoughts, and behaviors. And so it's not that your past will eventually always be brought to the surface and everyone in the world will know everything that you've done. It's you will be formed because of it. This past week, our staff, if I could just give some context for where my head is going, our staff, we had a staff development, and Nathan Collier came in and taught our staff about personality types and how people shape. And he used a Harry Potter sorting hat, which was my favorite thing ever, if I could be honest on that. And so I've been thinking about Harry Potter a lot more than I should recently. And allow me to use a Harry Potter illustration. There's this thing within the Harry Potter stories that is used by the evil villain. The nerds know who I'm talking about. I'm one of you. And it's called a Horcrux. And as I read through the accounts of the books, this is like the thing that I thought was like a little too much for me. You know, that is like, I can get into sci-fi fantasy, but sometimes some things are like, they push me over the edge, and it's not always the right thing. When I was a youth pastor, we had a movie night, and we were watching the movie Cars, because it's the only thing that I could get my parents to agree to. So we're watching the movie Cars, and there's this scene in the movie Cars. Have we seen the movie Cars? Okay, good, enough of you. I was gonna say, if we're not in on that, then we're gonna have a come to Jesus moment right here over Pixar, and we'll lay it all down now. So there's this scene in the movie Cars in which the cars are winding through the wilderness, and there's this beautiful waterfall coming down, and one of the kids in my youth group sitting there, and he goes, "Oh yeah, like that's real." Dylan, talking cars. Like you're gonna draw the line at the waterfall when we're engaged in the talking cars, Dylan. So I understand the fact that this throws me off is a little bit off in this world of witches and wizards and everything else. But there's this concept of the Horcrux. And the Horcrux is this. It is this object that is created because someone wants to live forever. And the way in which it is created is that for someone to live forever, they have to first undergo a spell, a thing, in which they split their soul. And so their soul is split into different parts. And in the Harry Potter stories, there's this villain, Voldemort, who splits his soul in 7 different pieces, in 7 different objects, so he can keep on living. And when people talk about this concept, they go, the problem is when you do that, you're not really alive. Like he has this in a way so that he can always live, and yet he's never really alive. And as I'd read through these, and I read through the books and then watched the movies, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like this Horcrux thing, this is ridiculous. And then I realized that's what we do. Because this is what we do. Is we go, I've got this thing that I did, or that I lied about, or that happened to me, or that I engaged in. And I don't like it. And if I could just push this aside, then I could go live my life. if I could just compartmentalize this and leave this in the corner, or leave this thought buried deep within my memory, never to be spoken about to anyone, then I could be happy, then I could be healthy, then I could pursue the future that I want to pursue, then I could have the relationships that I've always longed to have. I know this is weird, but I realize that the reality is that all of us are somewhat creating Horcruxes. We're splitting our souls in the idea that if I could just forget and remove my past, then I can be a better version of myself. If I could create this internal divorce between the things that I'm proud of and the things that I'm ashamed of, and remove the things that I'm ashamed of from common thought, then I'll be better. I'll be more accepted. I'll be more loved. And here's the problem with that. It's the second problem of trying to create that division, and that's this. You don't get to play hide and seek. See, if I give this as an analogy, let's say as a church we were to go out after this and we're all gonna play football. Probably a bad idea, okay? But let's say as a church we're all gonna go play football. And some of us would be on offense, some of us would be on defense, some of us would be shouting cheers from the sideline, some of us would be on special teams. And we'd all have different roles, we'd all be engaged in different things, but we would all be playing football. We would all be playing the same game. You would say, no matter what your role was, that you were playing football. And I realized something was wrong in the way in which we titled this game that all kids have played. We title it hide and seek. You don't get to do both. Like you don't get to hide unless if you're playing with Molly, just to be clear. But you don't get to hide and seek at the same time. You hide or you seek. You remain hidden or you search something out. And this is what I found from the story of Moses, is that Moses was not hiding from his past. He was hiding from his future. You see, God had called Moses already to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And so in this moment in which he goes and hides by the well, removes himself from the land of Egypt, he's not removing his past. His past is there. He's hiding from where God is leading him. He's hiding from what's ahead of him. And I realize the same thing is true of every single one of us. You can hide from your past, or you can move into your future. But you cannot move into your future as long as you're attempting to hide your past. You don't get to do both. And sometimes I'll hear people talk about this, like spiritually when it comes to faith, and it's like, oh, I worshiped or I prayed or I did this, but I didn't really feel like God's presence. I didn't really feel like I was there. And feelings are not the litmus test for whether God was there or not, but it's this constant like angst, yearning, like I don't feel like God is there. And the thing that I've realized over and over again is that you cannot find all of God with only part of your soul. If you're only bringing part of you to God, if you're only bringing the highlight reel, the best pieces, then you're not going to engage with all of who God is, because he wants all of you in this moment. And so this is what I want you to see, is the way in which we deal with our past is not how God views it. The way in which we view our past of just going, if I could just push that aside, keep it hidden, not bring it up in any given moment, not bring the thought, not bring the deed, not bring the action up in any moment, then I'll be better. I want you to see that is not how God views your past. I want to show you two different passages from the book of Isaiah. We're going to have both of these on the screen. The first one comes from Isaiah chapter 43, verse 25. Isaiah 43, verse 25. This is what God speaks to the prophet Isaiah, and then he writes down, Isaiah 43, 25. He says this, I alone will blot out your sins for my own sake and will never think of them again. Isn't that good news? Like God is speaking to you in this moment. And he's saying, this is what you need to know. I will deliberately not bring your faults, failures, imperfections, mistakes, and sins back up. And I used to have this idea in my head. People would talk to me, they'd talk about like the importance of confessing your sins to God, of like asking forgiveness for your sins. And this is the thought that I had, as ridiculous as this is. I said, I can't confess that to God because then he'll know. It's stupid. It's like, you need to confess your sins, but then he'll know what I did. He knows. But God says this, when you bring them to him, he does not use your past to hurt you. He does not use your past to harm you. He deliberately does not bring it back up so that you can have a future. Now I think the great error, maybe for those of you who grew up in church at some point in time, is that's where we stopped the story. That's where we quit talking about the way in which God works. And so I'm gonna need your help here in a second, but first let me explain it like this, okay? We need to understand that first off, your faith is formed from the past. Your faith is formed in the past. That when you look back on your life at what God has done, what you will see is a history of faithfulness. You will gain confidence to see over and over again that what God has promised has come true. Let me explain it like this. This right here is your story. This is part of your life. This is part of your account. And if you would actually have the discipline and endurance to read through it, I'll acknowledge endurance, because once you get to that third book, Leviticus, I gotta tell you, it's gonna take all the endurance you have in the world in order to get through that guy. But what you'll see over and over again is you'll see something God has promised way early on is fulfilled thousands of years later. You'll see something God promises early in life is fulfilled generations and generations later. And so if we would have the moment not to stay stuck in this, but to reflect a little bit and to be able to go, I'm here, but how did I get here? No, we never do that. We go, I'm here, and what are they doing? And what are they doing? And what are they doing? And I'm doing better than them, and I guess I'm not doing better than them. We spend all our time looking around us to compare ourselves. If you would actually get to the point and be able to go, I'm here, but how did I get here? What you will see is that God was faithful over and over again. And so your faith is formed in the past. It's formed from the faithfulness of what God has done, but it is never meant to stay there. Because your faith lives in the future. It's formed in the past, but it lives in the future in the things that God is leading you into. And so what we usually do is we stop our instruction and our teaching in the narrative on forgiveness right at the point in time when God forgives you. But he does something with it. He doesn't just end with, you're forgiven. Good job. He uses it for something significant. I want to show you the second passage from the book of Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 49. Isaiah chapter 49, verse 1 through 4. I'm getting excited. I'm going to need you to match my energy within 2 energy levels, okay? Can I help you? Can you help me with that? Thank you. Isaiah 49, starting in verse 1, says this, listen to me, all you in distant lands, pay attention, you who are far away. The Lord called me before my birth. From within the womb, he called me by name. He made my words of judgment as sharp as a sword. He has hidden me in the shadow of his hand. I am like a sharp arrow in his quiver. Turn to your neighbor, tell him sharp arrow. This is important, okay? We're gonna come back to this in just a second, but let me explain it like this. Yesterday, I spent a beautiful day watching my Penn State Nittany Lions lose their second game in a row. And so, no. Energy can come later, not right now in this moment. Give me a moment. So, as I'm watching, there's this play in the game in which they pass the ball to the tight end, and the tight end, the safety is coming up to tackle the Penn State tight end, and he tried to juke him. He's a tight end, and he tried to juke the safety, and he got tackled. And the announcers were all over it. They go, he needs to know what he is. He needs to know he's a tight end. He can just bowl him over. Give him a stiff arm, lower your head. You don't get cute, you don't get fancy when you're a tight end. You just run over the guy. And I think that's important to know what you are. Is that for some of us, we've told ourselves a narrative that says our past is bruised, our past is battered, our past is broken, and it cannot be used. And what God says right here, he says, no. Sharp arrow. That's what I see. Sharp arrow. Now it continues. Isaiah is going to express his emotion. He's going to continuously come back to this idea, but he's going to express what he feels because we all have some pushback. Verse 3, it says, he said to me, you are my servant Israel, and you will bring me glory. I replied, but my work seems so useless. I have spent my strength for nothing and to no purpose. Yet I leave it all in the Lord's hand. I will trust God for my reward. My work seems so useless. I just cleaned these floors. I have spent my strength for nothing and to no purpose. This is what we do. We go, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't made that decision. I blew that relationship. I blew that opportunity. I botched that one. Do you ever have those moments where you just like have a conversation and you go, well, that was a loss. He goes, this is the way that we look at our past. Failed, 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 failed. But he continuously comes back to this idea that God says, that's his emotion, that's Isaiah's emotion. That's not truth, that's his emotion. But this is what God says. He says, he made my words of judgment as sharp as a sword. He has hidden me in the shadow of his hand. I am like a sharp arrow in his quiver. That's an idea that's going to be uncomfortable for us to grab a hold of, but we need to. You are like a sharp arrow in God's quiver. You are a sharp arrow in God's quiver. See, a couple weeks ago, we do this thing before each service where we have a team rally. We gather together in the lobby, and everyone who's serving that morning, we gather up in a big circle. We start clapping. Some of you, that's explaining why people start clapping every single time you're walking in. You're, well, I guess they're really glad that I'm here. This is fantastic. And so we just clap, and it's just time to talk about what's going on this morning and why it matters. And a couple weeks ago, our team rally was better than our service, which made me feel uncomfortable. I'm just going to admit that. Like, someone gave like a mini, 2-minute message, and I was like, well, that's better than everything I had to say in my 45 minutes within there. But let me share with you what was shared. A lady by the name within our church who's so significant, Lisa Carey, came up and she started to share her story. And this is what she said. When I first started coming to BCN, I sat in the very, very back. And the reason why I did is because I wanted to get in and out without ever having to talk to anyone. I wanted to get in at the last second, and I wanted to leave as quick as I could, sometimes before service ended, which is not happening today. I said I want to get in and out as quick as possible, and this is why. Because I thought that my past disqualified me from being a part of a community like this. I thought the things that I had done no longer made me acceptable and no longer made me usable by God. And then she started to share the part of her story that has to do with addiction and all the hurt and heartache that caused in her life. He said, but now as a church, we're about to engage in the work of addiction recovery. And not just helping people recover from addiction, but helping them find Jesus throughout the process because he's their true hope and the one that they need. And then she shared this. The thing that I thought disqualified me is the exact same thing that God is using in this moment. The thing that I was the most embarrassed and ashamed of is the tool that God is using to bring redemption to him. This is what I want you to see in this moment. This is so important. You have a past. You have something that is guilt that has made its way as part of your identity, and you want to keep that hidden. That's your goal predominantly, is to keep that hidden. And if I can keep it hidden, then I can move forward. I want you to see that's not the case. You cannot keep your past hidden and continuously seek what God has for you. And so you need to understand that what you think about your past is not what God thinks about your past. What you see as a weakness is what God uses as a weapon. To understand that my failure is no longer failure in the hands of God, because he has not said I'm a failure. He has said, no, I'm a sharp arrow in his quiver. That's what I am. The thing that I thought disqualified me is the exact same thing that God is using to bring redemption and to bring hope to someone else's story. That you don't have to live within a narrative that says, I'm broken, I'm beaten, I'm battered, I'm bruised, because you bring it to God and he goes, that's the exact thing that I want to use. This is what I found. So we'll meet with this recovery group that started. It's going to launch in February of next year. And sometimes people share their stories of addiction and their different physical substance addictions. And this is what I found myself as people are sharing their stories. I became jealous of their addiction story. Because I didn't have a physical drug addiction story. And these stories are absolutely amazing. I'm like, man, I'm jealous of that. The biggest physical substance addiction I've had is Mike and Ike's. Because I ate a box every day for 10 years. And that doesn't speak to anyone. I can't get up and go, hi, I'm Kevin. Hi, Kevin. I really like Mike and Ike's. What? He needs to go back in the kids area. I'm maybe you talk to them. That'll resonate with them. My story didn't mean anything, but theirs did. Because what was a weakness is now a weapon in the moment. Now, this is what we don't do. We don't boast in our weakness. We don't go, well, I did this. Isn't that great? We boast in our God who's able to use our weakness to bring good to the world. I need someone else to help me preach this message. We use what is in our past, what was once remained hidden, for God to help us find our future. Now, here's the thing that's amazing. As we look at the account of Moses, Moses knew at this point in time, before he killed the Egyptian, that God was going to use him to bring the Israelites out of slavery. We usually look at this moment in which God speaks to him through a burning bush. God had already spoken to him. He knew why he was there. And so this is what I wonder. What if Moses hadn't ran? That's my question. I wonder what would have happened if Moses hadn't ran from Egypt. Because he knew God was going to use him. I wonder what would have happened if he didn't hide from his past, but instead always sought out his future. And the reality is this, we will never know. We will never know what would have happened if Moses hadn't ran. But that's not the important thing for us this morning. This is what I want you to hear. You will never know how God would have used you if you had run forward instead of remained hidden. You will never know what lies at stake. You will never know what hope you would have found or someone else could have found through you, God working through you. If you stay hidden, if you spend all of your energy trying to hide what was in your past instead of looking forward into what God has called you.